All right, first one comes from Jake in Huntsville. Sounds like he's an angry Alabama fan. Hear me out here. There's a national narrative that Georgia football is now on a different level than Alabama football, and the impression given by many outlets is that Bama isn't even in the same class as Georgia. However, over the last 14 years, Georgia is 1-7 versus Bama, with their sole victory coming in the 2022 National Championship, a game in which they trailed in the fourth quarter. Should we pump the brakes on this narrative? How far do you really think the gap is between the two at this moment?
Well, I mean, let's start with the fact that Georgia right now is the standard in college football. That is not some secret. That is not some hypothesis. This is fact. They've won consecutive national championships. They are right now, based on preseason prognostications, favored by many to win 3 in a row. Now, will they? We'll find out. I mean, we haven't seen the three-peat, obviously, in quite some time. But when you look at Georgia and what they've done the last couple of years, they've done a remarkable job of being able to replenish talent. We talked last year going into the season. Can they replace 15 players that were drafted in the 2023 NFL draft? 2022 NFL draft, excuse me. Can they replace 9 players on defense? Can they replace that many first rounders? And many people, self-included, had question marks going into last year. Would they be able to replicate the success of the year before? And not only did they do that, I think in many ways, last year's team was maybe even a little bit better across the board at times than they were in 2021 when they won the first championship under Kirby Smart. They're the standard. They're number one right now. There's no denying that. Now, Alabama, for a very long time, the better part of a decade, maybe even longer than that, was the standard in college football. They were number one. They had the best players. Regardless of who departed the program, it didn't matter. The expectations remained the same. That has not quite been the case the last couple of years. Doesn't mean that they can't get back there. It doesn't mean things won't be different when we have this conversation a year from now. But ultimately, Georgia is the top dog. No pun intended. So, yes, 1-7, but you're citing back into a time in which Mark Richt was the head coach at Georgia. You're citing back into a time in which Nick Saban was going head-to-head against Kirby Smart in 2017. Kirby Smart was in year 2. Nick Saban was in year 10 or 11. So it's a little bit different to compare those teams. It was early in Smart's tenure. He's done a remarkable job of creating Georgia from the same vein that Alabama was created with back in the early part of the Saban tenure. 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. Looks a lot similar when they won 3 championships in a 5-year period and was at number one in all 5 years. Looks very similar to what Georgia's creating right now. So it's no reason to try to pretend like the gap doesn't exist. There is a little bit of a gap right now, but all that can change this upcoming year because you're only as good as your most recent game. Alabama looked great in theirs. Georgia looked phenomenal in theirs. They're number one. They're the top dog. But if you get behind Georgia, Alabama is certainly in the mix for the number 2 spot at the very worst. Obviously, Ohio State's in that conversation, among several others. So don't panic. But right now, yes, it'd be impossible to ignore the fact that the Dogs are the program to beat right now in college football.